Your kindness is not your weakness. Your weakness is giving it to people who have learned they can take it without consequence. You help them, you forgive them, you explain their behavior, you give them another chance, then another. You tell yourself they are struggling, that they will change, that eventually they will recognize your value. But some people do not become grateful because you give more. They become entitled to more. The moment your kindness becomes predictable, it can lose its value in their eyes. They know you will answer, they know you will forgive, they know you will stay. And once someone becomes certain that you will tolerate their behavior, they have little reason to change it. The transcript presents this as emotional dependence, disguised as kindness when your need to preserve the relationship causes you to tolerate what you should have rejected. That is where you must become ruthless, not cruel, clear. Stop measuring people by what they promise and start measuring them by patterns. Do they respect your boundaries? Do they appreciate what you give? Do they change after hurting you? Do they remain present when they need nothing from you? If the answer keeps being no, stop giving them unlimited access. You do not need revenge. You do not need to expose them. You do not need to explain why you are leaving. You simply reduce your availability, because every time you reward betrayal with another opportunity, you teach that person something. Your boundaries are negotiable, and people test the limits you refuse to enforce. This is why forgiveness without change can become self-betrayal. Forgiveness may release resentment, but it does not require you to restore someone's access to your life. You can forgive someone and still walk away. You can understand someone's pain and still refuse to carry it. You can love someone and still decide that their behavior is unacceptable. That is not a contradiction. That is a boundary. Your care should be given where there is mutual respect. Your loyalty should be given where there is consistency. Your energy should be invested where it produces something meaningful. Because your energy is finite, every hour spent explaining yourself to an ungrateful person is an hour taken from your own future. Every emotional battle you repeat is energy you could have used to build your life. Every time you rescue someone who refuses to change, you delay your own growth. You were never meant to spend your entire life proving that you are a good person. The right people will recognize your kindness without demanding that you destroy yourself to demonstrate it. The wrong people may call your boundaries selfish. Let them. Sometimes people become angry not because you harmed them, but because you stopped allowing them to benefit from harming you. That distinction changes everything. Your kindness needs a limit. Your forgiveness needs discernment. Your loyalty needs standards. And your access needs a gate. Do not become ruthless by losing your heart. Become ruthless by becoming selective about who gets to touch it. When you finally withdraw your energy from the people who continually waste it, something returns to you, your strength. And then you face the next question. What will you do with everything that hurt you? Because the pain you once thought would destroy you can become something else entirely. It can become power. Pain does not ask whether you are ready. Betrayal, rejection, failure, loss, they arrive without permission and leave you with a choice. Let the experience define you, or use it to rebuild yourself. Most people waste pain by asking, why did this happen to me? A stronger question is, what is this teaching me? That shift changes everything. A betrayal can teach you that you trusted too quickly. A rejection can reveal how much of your self-worth depended on someone else's approval. A failure can expose a weakness in your preparation. A loss can force you to recognize that something you thought was permanent never was. Pain becomes useful when you stop treating it only as an injury and start treating it as information. The transcript repeatedly frames suffering this way, not simply as punishment, but as an opportunity to identify weaknesses, increase awareness, and evolve. Imagine someone destroys your trust. Your first instinct may be revenge. You want them to understand what they did. You want an apology. You want them to feel the same pain. But none of that necessarily makes you stronger. Instead, study what happened. What did you ignore? What did you tolerate? What signs did you dismiss? What boundary did you fail to enforce? That is where pain becomes valuable. You are no longer asking how to make the other person suffer. You are asking how to make sure the same lesson never has to be taught twice. This is the difference between wallowing in pain and extracting wisdom from it. You cannot always choose what happens to you. You can choose what happens next. The person who remains trapped in resentment keeps giving the past control over the present. every time they replay the betrayal, the person who hurt them continues to occupy their mind. The person who learns from it takes the experience back. They become more observant, more disciplined, more selective, not more bitter. That distinction matters. Pain should sharpen your judgment, not poison your character. If someone betrayed you, do not conclude that nobody can ever be trusted again. Learn to trust differently. If someone rejected you, do not conclude that you are worthless. Learn to stop outsourcing your worth. If you failed, do not turn failure into an identity. Find the weakness, correct it, and continue. The goal is not to become immune to pain. The goal is to become harder to destroy with it. The transcript describes suffering as a kind of forge. It strips away illusions and forces you to see yourself and others more clearly. That is why difficult experiences can sometimes create a level of awareness that comfort never could. Comfort allows assumptions to survive. Pain tests them. It reveals who actually cares. It reveals what you were depending on. It reveals what you can survive. And once you survive something you thought would destroy you, fear loses some of its power. You realize, I have been through worse, and I am still here. That realization changes how you move. You stop begging for people to stay because you know you can survive their departure. You stop accepting disrespect because you know loneliness is better than constant humiliation. You stop fearing every failure because you have already experienced failure and discovered that life continues. You become less reactive because you understand that temporary pain is not permanent destruction. That is resilience. But do not romanticize suffering. Pain itself does not automatically make someone stronger. Some people experience the same hardship repeatedly and learn nothing from it. The transformation comes from reflection. Pain plus reflection becomes wisdom. Pain without reflection becomes resentment. So, when something hurts you, resist the urge to immediately escape into distraction. Sit with the lesson long enough to understand it. Ask, what did this reveal? What must change? What will I never tolerate again? Then act on the answer. That is how a wound becomes a boundary. A betrayal becomes discernment. A rejection becomes independence. A failure becomes preparation. A loss becomes perspective. You do not have to thank the person who hurt you. You do not have to pretend the experience was good. You simply refuse to let the experience be wasted. Because the strongest version of you is not created by avoiding every painful experience. It is created when pain comes. You learn from it, rebuild, and refuse to become the same person who was vulnerable to it before. Do not waste your suffering. Extract the lesson, build from it, then move forward stronger than you were before. And once you stop needing pain to disappear before you can move, another dependency becomes visible, the need for everyone else to understand your choices. That is the next thing you must eliminate. You do not need everyone to understand you in order to become who you are meant to be. One of the most exhausting forms of dependence is needing other people to understand you. You explain why you made the decision. You explain why you walked away. You explain why you changed. You explain your intentions, your pain, and your reasons, hoping that one perfect explanation will finally make everyone see you correctly. But sometimes, the more you explain, the less control you have. The transcript's central idea is simple. You do not need universal understanding to live according to your own standards. People will interpret you through their own experiences, expectations, and biases. You can explain yourself perfectly, and they may still choose the interpretation they prefer. So ask yourself, am I explaining because communication is necessary, or because I cannot tolerate being misunderstood? Those are completely different motives. If someone genuinely matters and your actions affect them, communicate clearly. If you made a mistake, take responsibility. If clarification can prevent unnecessary harm, give it. But when someone has already decided what they want to believe about you, endless explanations rarely change anything. They simply give you another opportunity to defend yourself, and every defense reveals more. You explain why you became distant. They now know what hurt you. You explain why you rejected the opportunity. They now know what you fear. You explain why you are angry. They now know exactly what triggers you. You explain your next move. They now know what to expect. Information can create vulnerability when it is given without judgment. This is why restraint matters. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Someone thinks you are arrogant because you stopped seeking their approval. Let them think it. Someone believes you have changed because you no longer tolerate the same behavior. You probably have changed. Someone assumes your silence means weakness. They can keep assuming. Your responsibility is not to control every interpretation of you. Your responsibility is to control your behavior. This does not mean becoming deliberately mysterious or refusing to communicate. That would turn strength into immaturity. The goal is not to make people confused. The goal is to stop making their understanding a requirement for your peace. There is tremendous freedom in realizing that some people may never understand your decisions. You can leave without being understood. You can say no without being understood. You can change without receiving permission. You can choose a different life without convincing everyone that the choice is correct. The moment you accept that, you stop performing for approval. And something interesting happens. Your explanations become shorter because you no longer use them to seek validation. Instead of giving a 10-minute defense, you give one sentence. Instead of arguing with every criticism, you evaluate whether it contains anything useful. Instead of correcting every false assumption, you allow your actions to create the evidence. Results can explain what words cannot. If you become more disciplined, people will eventually see it. If you become more successful, the result speaks. If you become more peaceful, you do not need to announce it. If you establish stronger boundaries, people learn through your behavior. This is why self-assurance is more powerful than constant justification. A person who needs everyone to understand them can be controlled through misunderstanding. All someone has to do is accuse them of being selfish, cold, arrogant, or wrong, and they immediately begin defending themselves. Now the other person has control of the conversation. But if you can tolerate being misunderstood without abandoning your principles, the mechanism disappears. You are no longer reacting to every label. You are evaluating the source. Does this person's opinion matter? Do they know enough about the situation to judge it? Have they demonstrated that they genuinely care about the truth? If not, why are you fighting so hard for their approval? This is where silence becomes useful. Not as punishment, not as psychological warfare, as restraint. You simply refuse to spend your energy proving something to someone who has no meaningful role in your life. The transcript repeatedly connects silence with the ability to avoid exposing unnecessary information and emotional vulnerabilities. The deeper lesson is that you become less controllable when your emotional state no longer depends on how quickly someone understands or approves of you. Let them misunderstand. Let them question. Let them speculate. If your actions are aligned with your values, time will reveal more than an argument ever could. And there is one more thing you must stop doing: explaining your boundaries after you have already stated them. No is a complete answer. I can't is a complete answer. This doesn't work for me is a complete answer. You can add context when it is useful, but you do not need to build a legal case every time you protect yourself. Because when every boundary requires a long explanation, you are still asking permission to have one. Real self-respect sounds different. You know what you accept, you know what you reject, and you do not need an audience to make the decision legitimate. Once you stop needing to be understood, your attention becomes available for something far more important: understanding yourself. You begin to recognize what you actually want, what you tolerate out of fear, and which relationships survive only because you keep explaining your needs. That clarity creates freedom. And with that freedom comes the next step. You stop explaining why someone is walking away. You stop chasing them. You stop begging for attention, affection, or closure. You learn to detach. The moment you beg someone to stay, you give them control over something they should never have controlled: your sense of worth. You can love someone deeply and still let them go. You can care about a relationship and still refuse to chase someone who has decided to leave. You can want an apology and still move forward without receiving one. That is detachment. The transcript makes an important distinction. Loyalty is not the same as attachment. Loyalty can come from strength and choice. Attachment becomes dangerous when fear of losing someone determines your behavior. When you are afraid of losing someone, you become willing to tolerate almost anything. You send another message. You ask what went wrong. You explain yourself again. You promise to change. You accept behavior you would normally reject. Not because the relationship suddenly became healthy, but because the fear of losing it became stronger than your self-respect. That is dependence. And dependence creates leverage for the other person. Imagine someone repeatedly ignores you but knows that you will always chase them. Their silence becomes a weapon because they understand that you cannot tolerate the possibility of losing them. Now, change the situation. They disappear. You notice. You feel the pain, but you do not chase. You continue your life. Suddenly, their ability to control you through withdrawal disappears. That is the power of detachment. It does not mean you feel nothing. It means your feelings no longer make your decisions for you. This distinction is critical. Ruthlessness is not emotional emptiness. It is emotional discipline. You can be hurt and still walk away. You can miss someone and still refuse to return to what damaged you. You can love someone and still say, "This relationship no longer works for me." You can want closure and still accept that you may never receive it. That is maturity. Many people confuse chasing with loyalty because society teaches them that fighting for someone proves how much they care. But there is a point where fighting becomes begging, and begging changes the relationship. The more you chase what is leaving, the more you communicate that you are willing to abandon yourself to keep it. Stop doing that. If someone chooses distance, give them distance. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, step back. If someone makes it clear that they do not value your presence, believe their behavior. Do not turn rejection into a negotiation. The transcript describes detachment as a form of control because it removes the emotional reaction that manipulators depend upon. When you no longer panic at the possibility of losing someone, threats of abandonment become much less powerful. You become capable of saying, "I would rather lose this than lose myself." That sentence changes your standards. You stop accepting relationships simply because they exist. You start asking whether they are healthy, respectful, and reciprocal. You stop asking, "How do I make them stay?" You ask, "Is this something I should continue choosing?" That is the shift from attachment to agency. Detachment also protects you from chasing closure. Sometimes you will never receive the explanation you want. The person may never apologize. They may never admit what they did. They may even create a version of the story where they were the victim. You cannot build your peace around someone else's willingness to tell the truth. Closure sometimes comes from understanding the pattern yourself. They showed you who they were. You saw it. That can be enough. Walk away without demanding a final conversation that may only reopen the wound. But do not confuse detachment with disappearing from every difficult situation. If a relationship matters, communicate. If a problem can be repaired, attempt repair. If someone takes responsibility and genuinely changes, there may be a reason to rebuild. Detachment means you are free to choose, not forced to stay, not forced to leave. You decide based on reality rather than fear. That is what makes it powerful. And once you stop begging for access to other people's lives, you begin protecting access to your own. You become more selective about who enters, more careful about what you tolerate, more willing to walk away from chaos. That is where boundaries begin. Because detachment answers one question, "Can I leave?" Boundaries answer the next. What must someone do if they want to stay? And if you cannot answer that question, other people will answer it for you. A boundary is not a wall built to keep everyone away. It is a decision that tells people what they are allowed to do if they want access to you. Without boundaries, kindness becomes unlimited access. People can demand your time, cross your limits, disrespect you, apologize, and return as if nothing happened. Eventually, you begin calling this patience. It is not patience. It is a pattern you have allowed to continue. The transcript makes this point directly. When you repeatedly tolerate disrespect without consequence, you teach people what they can get away with. Think about someone who constantly interrupts your time. You tell them you are busy, but whenever they call, you answer. You complain about it afterward, yet the behavior continues. Why? Because your words said one thing, your actions taught another. A boundary is only real when behavior follows it. If you say, "I won't accept being spoken to that way," but continue the conversation every time it happens, the boundary is only a sentence. If you say, "I can't keep doing this," and then keep doing it, people learn that your limits can be ignored. This is why boundaries require consequences. Not revenge, not punishment, distance. Someone repeatedly disrespects you, reduce access. Someone constantly demands more than you can give, say no. Someone betrays your trust. Stop giving them the same level of trust. Someone repeatedly violates a clearly stated limit, end the interaction. You do not need to become aggressive. You need to become consistent. That consistency is what creates respect. The transcript describes boundaries as protection for what is valuable inside your life, your peace, time, energy, and self-respect. And that protection becomes especially important because people naturally test limits, not always maliciously. Sometimes people simply discover what you tolerate. If you tolerate interruptions, they interrupt. If you tolerate disrespect, they become comfortable with disrespect. If you forgive betrayal without requiring changed behavior, they may assume forgiveness will always be available. Your standards are communicated through what you consistently permit. That means one of the most important questions you can ask is, what behavior am I teaching people to expect from me? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, change the pattern. Start with small things. Say no without a 5-minute apology. Decline requests that interfere with your priorities. Leave conversations that become disrespectful. Stop responding immediately to every demand. Do not promise what you cannot deliver simply because you are afraid of disappointing someone. These actions seem small, but they change how you see yourself. Every time you enforce a reasonable boundary, you prove to yourself that your peace matters. And once you believe that, other people's reactions become less frightening. Some people will respect your boundaries. Others will challenge them. Pay attention to the difference. A healthy person may not always like your boundary, but they can respect it. A manipulative person often treats your boundary as an obstacle they need to overcome. That tells you something. If someone becomes angry because you said no, the anger does not automatically mean the boundary was wrong. Sometimes it means the boundary removed an advantage they had. This is why boundaries can reveal the truth about relationships. When you stop over-giving, who remains? When you stop solving everyone's problems, who still values you? When you stop accepting disrespect, who adjusts? When you stop making yourself endlessly available, who respects your time? You begin separating genuine connection from convenience. But there is an important balance. A boundary should protect your dignity, not control another person's life. You cannot demand that everyone behave exactly as you want. You can decide what you will do when their behavior crosses your standards. That distinction gives you real control. Instead of saying, "You are not allowed to treat me this way," you can say, "If you treat me this way, I will leave the conversation." The first tries to control them. The second controls your response. That is healthier and stronger. You also do not need to announce every boundary. Sometimes the most effective boundary is simply a change in access. Less contact, less information, less availability, less emotional investment. No dramatic explanation, no public conflict. Just a different level of access based on what the person has demonstrated. The transcript repeatedly emphasizes that boundaries are about protecting yourself rather than proving superiority. That distinction matters because boundaries should create peace, not another battlefield. You are not building a fortress because everyone is your enemy. You are building a gate because not everyone belongs inside. And when you finally stop feeling guilty for having limits, your relationships become clearer. The people who genuinely value you will adjust. The people who only valued unlimited access will resist. Either way, you learn the truth. Your goal is not to be liked by everyone. It is to be respected by the people who matter and at peace with yourself. Because every boundary says the same thing. My peace is not negotiable. And once you can protect your peace without anger, without guilt, and without lengthy explanations, you are ready for another form of control. The control of your words. Because sometimes the strongest boundary is not what you say, it is what you deliberately choose not to say. Silence becomes powerful when you stop using words to prove that you matter. Most people speak because they are uncomfortable with uncertainty. They explain their decisions, defend themselves against criticism, fill every pause, and answer every provocation. They believe more words will give them more control. Often, the opposite happens. The more unnecessary information you give away, the more predictable you become. Imagine someone insults you in front of others. Your instinct is to respond immediately. You want to correct them, defend your reputation, and make sure everyone knows the truth. But before speaking, ask one question. What will my response actually accomplish? If it protects something important, respond. If it only satisfies your anger, stay silent. That distinction is the foundation of strategic silence. Silence is not refusing to communicate. It is refusing to waste communication. There are moments when words are necessary. There are also moments when every additional sentence weakens your position. The person who constantly explains reveals their emotions. The person who constantly defends reveals their insecurities. The person who constantly reacts reveals their triggers. Eventually, people learn exactly which buttons to press. Silence removes that information. When you stop rushing to respond, you gain something most people lose in emotional situations: time to observe. Let the other person continue talking. They may reveal what they want. They may reveal what they fear. They may contradict themselves. They may expose the real reason behind the argument. You do not need to interrupt every sentence with your own. Sometimes listening gives you more information than speaking ever could. The transcript emphasizes this repeatedly. Silence allows others to reveal themselves while you remain focused on observation rather than reaction. But silence should never become a childish punishment. You are not refusing to speak so someone suffers. You are choosing not to participate in something that does not deserve your energy. That difference keeps silence powerful rather than manipulative. Someone provokes you? Pause. Someone misunderstands you? Evaluate whether clarification matters. Someone demands an immediate answer? Take the time you need if the decision allows it. Someone tries to drag you into an argument? You can simply decline. You do not have to answer every invitation to conflict. And when you do speak, make your words deliberate. Say what is necessary, then stop. This creates a different kind of presence. People begin to notice that you do not speak simply to fill space. When you say something, there is a reason behind it. That makes your words more valuable. Silence also protects your plans. You do not need to announce every decision before acting. You do not need to tell everyone what you are thinking. You do not need to explain every change in your life. Sometimes action is the explanation. If you are leaving a situation, leave. If you are changing your standards, live by them. If you are building something, build it. If you have decided to stop participating in a particular pattern, stop. You do not need to hold a press conference about your personal transformation. This is especially important when dealing with people who want a reaction. Their goal may not be to prove a point. Their goal may simply be to make you emotional. If you react, they succeed. If you remain composed, the interaction loses its reward. But do not confuse silence with weakness. A silent person can still be decisive. A calm person can still enforce boundaries. A quiet person can still leave. Silence does not mean you have nothing to say. It means you have enough control to decide whether saying it is worthwhile. That is a higher form of communication. The transcript connects this restraint with unpredictability. When people cannot easily read your emotional reactions, they have less ability to anticipate or manipulate your behavior. Again, the goal is not to frighten people. The goal is to become less reactive, because when you stop reacting automatically, you gain a pause between what happens and what you do next. That pause is where judgment lives. Someone says something offensive. Pause. Someone rejects you. Pause. Someone challenges your authority. Pause. Someone tries to make you feel guilty. Pause. Then decide. Do not let another person's emotion choose your behavior for you. Your silence should not be empty. It should be intentional. And eventually, people learn something important about you. They cannot automatically pull a reaction from you. That changes the dynamic. You become calmer because you no longer need the last word. You become clearer because you are not speaking from anger. You become harder to manipulate because your triggers are no longer public controls. And you preserve energy that would otherwise disappear into pointless arguments. The loudest person is not necessarily the strongest person. Sometimes, the strongest person is the one who could respond, but chooses not to. When you learn to control your words, you begin controlling your reactions. And when you control your reactions, you become harder to control. But there is still one form of attachment that can quietly undermine all of this. You can have boundaries. You can remain silent. You can detach from unhealthy relationships and still give someone more loyalty than they have earned. That is why the next lesson is uncomfortable. Your loyalty should never require you to surrender your independence. Loyalty is valuable only when it is chosen freely. The moment loyalty becomes blind dependence, it stops being strength and becomes a cage. You can be loyal to a person, a team, a relationship, or a mission, but you should never surrender your ability to think independently simply because you once promised to stay. The transcript's central warning is that blind loyalty creates dependence, and dependence weakens your ability to make decisions when circumstances change. People change, relationships change, organizations change, interests change. A person who was right for you 5 years ago may not be right for you today. That does not automatically make the past meaningless. It means loyalty must be evaluated against reality. Imagine you commit yourself completely to one person because they once helped you. Years later, their behavior becomes destructive. They repeatedly violate your trust, but you remain because leaving feels like betrayal. Now your loyalty is no longer based on respect. It is based on guilt. That is dangerous. You should be able to appreciate what someone once did for you without allowing that history to control every future decision. Gratitude does not require permanent dependence. The same applies to work. You can respect a company that gave you an opportunity without sacrificing your entire future to it. You can respect a mentor without agreeing with every decision they make. You can love a friend without defending behavior you know is wrong. Loyalty should strengthen relationships. It should not eliminate judgment. This is where selective loyalty becomes important. Give deeper trust to people who consistently demonstrate character. Maintain commitments that are reciprocal and meaningful. But keep enough independence that walking away remains possible when circumstances fundamentally change. The transcript emphasizes that a wise person should not become completely dependent on one person or one source of security. That principle is broader than loyalty. It is about maintaining options. Do not let one relationship become your entire emotional world. Do not let one job become your only source of income. Do not let one person become the only person who can open doors for you. Do not let one approval determine your self-worth. The more concentrated your dependence becomes, the more vulnerable you become when that source changes. Independence gives loyalty meaning. If you stay because you genuinely choose to stay, your loyalty has value. If you stay because you believe you have no other option, it is dependence disguised as devotion. There is another mistake people make. Believing loyalty means agreeing with everything. It does not. Sometimes the most loyal thing you can do is tell someone the truth they do not want to hear. Sometimes loyalty means refusing to participate in something destructive. Sometimes loyalty means walking away when staying would enable behavior that harms both of you. Real loyalty can contain boundaries. Blind loyalty cannot. And this protects you from another trap: becoming loyal to an identity that no longer serves you. Maybe you have always been the reliable one, so you keep saying yes. Maybe you have always been the forgiving one, so you keep accepting the same betrayal. Maybe you have always been the loyal friend, so you remain available even when the relationship becomes one-sided. Your identity can become a prison if you refuse to update it. You are allowed to change the terms. You are allowed to outgrow relationships. You are allowed to reconsider commitments. You are allowed to say, "This no longer works for me." That is not betrayal. That is judgment. But selective loyalty does not mean becoming opportunistic or pretending to care only when it benefits you. That would destroy trust and eventually isolate you. The lesson from the source is better understood as maintaining sovereignty within loyalty, remaining capable of choosing rather than becoming blindly dependent. Your ultimate allegiance should be to your values and purpose. People may come and go. Circumstances may change. Your responsibility is to remain capable of making decisions that align with the person you are trying to become. So give loyalty, but give it consciously. Give trust, but let behavior earn deeper trust. Give commitment, but do not surrender your judgment. And never confuse someone having your loyalty with having permanent ownership of your life. Because the moment you know you can walk away, your relationships become choices rather than chains. That is the foundation of real independence. And when you combine independence with boundaries, silence, detachment, and disciplined attention, something changes. Insults lose their power. Rejection loses its grip. Manipulation becomes easier to recognize. Betrayal becomes information rather than identity. You stop asking how to protect yourself from every possible attack. You begin building yourself so strongly that not every attack can reach you. That is the final transformation. Becoming untouchable. Being untouchable does not mean becoming cruel enough that nobody can hurt you. It means becoming so grounded in yourself that another person's behavior no longer has automatic control over your decisions. The world will still disappoint you. People will still betray you. Someone will still misunderstand you. You will still experience rejection, loss, criticism, and uncertainty. The difference is that none of these things has to own you. The transcript describes this final stage as self-mastery, moving from dependence on approval, affection, and external validation toward control over your own emotions, choices, and direction. Look at what has changed. You stopped giving unlimited energy to people who were ungrateful. You learned to extract lessons from pain instead of allowing pain to become your identity. You stopped needing everyone to understand your choices. You learned to walk away instead of begging. You built boundaries around your time, energy, and peace. You learned that silence can be more disciplined than reaction. You became selective with loyalty without surrendering your independence. Now, all 7 lessons converge into one principle. No one should have automatic control over your inner world. Someone can insult you. They cannot decide whether you lose your entire day. Someone can reject you. They cannot decide whether you believe you are worthless. Someone can leave. They cannot decide whether you chase them. Someone can betray you. They cannot decide whether you become bitter. Someone can misunderstand you. They cannot decide whether you abandon your principles just to be accepted. That is what being untouchable actually means. You still feel. You simply choose what your feelings are allowed to control. This is why ruthlessness, in its disciplined form, is not about becoming heartless. It is about removing the parts of yourself that are easiest for other people to exploit. The need for approval, the fear of abandonment, the inability to say no, the habit of over-explaining, the desperation to be understood, the belief that forgiveness requires renewed access, the belief that loyalty requires dependence. Remove those weaknesses, and the same world that once controlled you begins to lose its leverage. But becoming untouchable requires more than emotional control. You need a life strong enough to stand without constant external validation. Build skills, build discipline, build financial and practical independence where possible. Build relationships based on mutual respect. Build a purpose that does not disappear when one person leaves. The more stable your foundation becomes, the less power temporary circumstances have over you. This is why self-mastery is more important than intimidation. You do not need people to fear you. You need to know that you can walk away from what harms you. You do not need everyone to respect you. You need enough self-respect to stop accepting what destroys your peace. You do not need to control other people's choices. You need to control your own. That is real sovereignty, and it changes the way you respond to difficulty. When betrayal happens, you study it. When failure happens, you learn from it. When someone crosses a boundary, you enforce it. When someone leaves, you let them leave. When someone provokes you, you decide whether the situation deserves a response. When someone misunderstands you, you ask whether their understanding actually matters. You stop treating every external event as an emergency. That calm is not weakness. It is evidence that your center is no longer outside you. The transcript's final message is that the untouchable person is not someone who avoids every hardship. They are forged by hardship while becoming less dependent on external validation and more anchored in their own discipline and judgment. That is why the goal should never be to become impossible to hurt. That goal is unrealistic. The goal is to become difficult to control. There is a difference. Pain may reach you. It does not have to direct you. Loss may hurt. It does not have to make you beg. Criticism may sting. It does not have to define you. Betrayal may change you. It does not have to make you cruel. You can remain human without remaining vulnerable to every form of manipulation. That is the balance. Your kindness can remain, but now it has boundaries. Your loyalty can remain, but now it has judgment. Your emotions can remain, but now they have discipline. Your relationships can remain, but now access is earned. Your voice can remain, but now silence is also available. And your heart can remain open without leaving the door unlocked for everyone. That is the version of ruthlessness worth developing. Not the person who destroys others. The person who refuses to destroy himself just to keep them happy. The person who can say no without guilt. The person who can leave without revenge. The person who can forgive without forgetting the lesson. The person who can love without becoming dependent. The person who can lose without losing himself. That person is difficult to manipulate because there are fewer levers to pull. You cannot control someone through approval when they no longer need constant validation. You cannot control someone through rejection when they know they can survive being alone. You cannot control someone through guilt when they understand the difference between responsibility and manipulation. You cannot control someone through silence when they have learned to create their own closure. And you cannot control someone through fear when they have already learned that protecting their self-respect sometimes requires walking away. This is the final shift. You stop asking, "How do I make people treat me better?" You start asking, "What will I do when they don't?" That question puts your power back where it belongs, with you, because you cannot command every person. You cannot prevent every betrayal. You cannot guarantee that everyone will appreciate you, but you can decide what happens after those things occur. You can withdraw. You can rebuild. You can learn. You can strengthen your boundaries. You can change your standards. You can redirect your energy. And you can continue moving. That is why the world does not have to become kinder for you to become stronger. You become harder to break. Not by becoming cold, by becoming clear. Not by becoming cruel, by becoming disciplined. Not by trusting nobody, by making trust something people earn through consistent behavior. Not by hiding from pain, by refusing to waste it, and not by controlling everyone around you. By mastering yourself, the world will continue testing you. Let it. Every test can reveal something. Every betrayal can teach discernment. Every rejection can strengthen independence. Every difficult relationship can clarify your boundaries. Every painful experience can show you where you were still dependent. You no longer have to ask why the world is trying to break you. Ask what the experience is revealing. Then use it. Because the strongest version of you is not the version that never suffers. It is the version that suffers, learns, adapts, and refuses to return to the same weakness. That is what it means to become untouchable. Nothing has to stop hurting you. Nothing simply gets to own you. And when you finally understand that, the world does not become less dangerous. You simply become much harder to break.